Hi, this is Board Chair John Neary, and I'm going to go ahead and it is 3 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting of Thursday, April 2nd of the Community Transit Board of Directors to order. I have a few opening comments, but before that, I think I'm going to ask you, Rachel, to do the roll call. I just want to make sure we have all the board members on the line and that we have all the staff that we need on the line before we begin the rest of the meeting. So, Rachel, could you please call the roll? Rachel?
Oh, here I am. Apologies. I realized I had my mute on.
Oh, great.
Okay. Sorry,
Can you call
Chair,
the roll,
about that. My fault. Okay. Councilmember Kim Daughtry. Mayor Leonard Kelly.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Tom Mineral.
Here.
Councilmember Nate Nearing.
Here.
Mayor John Nearing.
Here.
Labor Representative Lance Norton.
Here.
Councilmember Jan Schwette.
Here.
Mayor Nicola Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Todd.
Here.
Councilmember Stephanie Wright. Okay, and I'll just circle back. Councilmember Kim Daughtry.
Here.
Thank you. Chair, we do have a quorum. I'll also take roll call for Emmett Heath. Are you on the line?
Here.
Thank you. Cesar Portillo.
Here.
Roland Behe.
Here.
Thank you. And Sarah Hayden.
Here.
Thank you. That confirms we have all of our speakers on the line as well, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome to everybody. As everybody is well aware, we're in completely unprecedented times here, and we appreciate everyone's flexibility in logging on to do this board meeting via phone conference. The staff, the board, and then all of the public who has joined us. I want to thank those of you for joining the call as well. It's a difficult time for the agency, for all of our local communities, for the nation as a whole. That goes without saying. There are a few housekeeping items I'd like to take care of before we get to public comment. As you know, with phone and virtual meetings, if you're like any of us on here, I'm sure you've been on dozens of them here over the last couple of weeks, we would ask you to please mute your phone if you're not talking. That's essential to having an organized meeting without a lot of background. So if you're not talking, please mute your phone. And then when you want to talk, just remember to unmute it, or if you're called upon, just remember to unmute it. If for any reason this call is dropped, please just dial back into the phone conference. Board members and staff presenters will reference any corresponding visuals so that you can easily follow along on your packets, which you all received from Rachel last week. Board members, if you could, to help me out, please state your name first when you're speaking, particularly when you're making a motion and a second, so we know who is making the motion in the second. But it would be very helpful if anytime anybody's speaking as a board member, you could just state your name. I can go through the names alphabetically when we have regular board contacts there at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public comment portion of the meeting. We did notify the public that we would be accepting written comments. I have asked that Rachel read those comments into the record so that everybody can hear them. And so we will start with that. Rachel, could you read the written public comment into the record?
Yes, I'm here. I'm ready to start. So the first comment is from Sin Stroad. I'm a driver for CT. When the virus catches me, I say when because it will catch us all. I have a few health conditions that make it likely I will die from it. And I'm okay with that because then my wife will at least have my life insurance money to help her survive the next couple of years. The most responsible thing I can do for her is to keep showing up to work every day and drive a mostly empty bus around and wonder if every tickle in my sinuses or throat is the start of the stopwatch. When that happens, I will take my leave. Comment number 2 from Bradley Barr. I'm a driver for community transit for 5 years and would like to say a few brief comments. As of my writing, there currently are 4,713 deaths attributed to the coronavirus. Latest estimates in the low range are for 100,000 deaths in the U.S. This is urgent and bigger than all of us that we keep people safe. I do not feel that people are safe while riding my bus and they are being put at risk for the virus. On my last day driving the previous week, I transported several elderly passengers at the same time as passengers coughing. We need to protect the vulnerable and save lives. Please shut down all bus service and save lives. Medical personnel that may need our services to get to work can be provided with a safer transportation option. Please do this before it's too late, as I fear it already is. Comment 3 from Victor Riley Dawson, coach operator, Snohomish County resident. Dear Community Transit Board of Directors, I take this opportunity to plead with you to temporarily suspend normal operations. Our current crisis is unlike any we have faced before and requires staunch action to save human lives. Under normal circumstances, you can look at a map of our transit system and see a network that connects residents of our county with any needs they might require. But with COVID-19, our network becomes a vessel to spread this vicious virus amongst our most disenfranchised. The reasons given to continue to operate through our community is so that first responders, healthcare workers, and other essential services can still get to work. I believe these goals can be met through a targeted approach using DART and other company resources in a manner that protects the health of our community. There is no empirical evidence that a temporary halt of normal services will result in the loss of human life. The facts, however, do support that close contact with one another can result in death. It is possible to conduct proper social distancing and maintain a virus-free environment on our buses. We've lost one driver to COVID-19, Scott Ryan, a father of 3 Snohomish County residents. Please do everything in your power to stop more casualties from occurring. Comment number 4, Joe Kunzler. Let me be respectfully acute. In the past 5 years of transit activism, I find email exchanges coupled to occasional phone calls and visits with transit board members and transit employees the best means of communication. I also think it's inherently unfair for few to be able to make oral comments due to your underappreciated schedule as federal board members. This unfairness must be reckoned with when COVID-19 is contained. Then there is the matter of this discussion. It is in the shadow of Alex Timmerman, subject of the recently self-published book, Tackling Timmerman, with the second edition coming out in the summer, after I see what reforms stick post-COVID-19. But still, there are no legal guidelines from the state on public comment. There should be. Also, I'm going to be very blunt without being rude, that corporate boardroom is not a place for transit advocates to attend via transit without a significant walk and wait network, and the attitude I've gotten from some CT employees and board members is counterproductive to genuine acceptance of community input. Maybe time CT leadership just finished the perceived task of removing public input from board meetings themselves and went to email comments to place online, plus streaming and podcasting the meeting. My understanding anyway is there is no legal requirement for public comment except during transit development plans and annual updates. I would, for the sake of maximum public input, suggest politely, post-COVID-19, and me noticing the aforementioned sentiments, maybe holding those hearings required under RCW 35.58.2795 at Everett Station at 6 p.m., no later than the Tuesday before CT Board meeting Thursdays, and stream the hearings for board member review before a Thursday afternoon meeting. I think you should please have a hearing about your spring 2021 service changes via the means laid out above in, say, June. Please also accept that when I'm critical of wording and tone, I'm precisely because Joey Kunzler genuinely cares and believes in Think Transit First. If I could thank you, hug every CT employee, and we had the time for me to tell the stories about how helpful your public records office is, I would. Finally, with that, we writers do care about you. So please keep your operators, your mechanics, your public records officer, librarian, board admin, your planners, your admin folks, and CEO Heath safe. So please keep asking us writers for help to that end. Me, I'll wait until after COVID-19 is contained to log my regular public records requests and donate for PPE where I can. Okay, final board comment, number 5. Hello, my name is Timothy Andapat, and I'm a coach operator at Community Transit. I've been an employee since the beginning of January 2018. I'm writing to voice my concerns over the current pandemic that we are all facing. As you know, we coach operators are exposed daily to the threat of COVID-19. Many of us are fearful of coming to work with the possibility of being infected with the virus and becoming critically ill or worse. We also fear that we could spread the virus to our loved ones at home. I'm married with 2 boys, 3 and 2 years old. I understand that community transit is considered an essential service, and there are things being done to protect coach operators to continue service. Some of these things are ineffective or are just not enough as far as safety for our drivers is concerned. One example that has made drivers feel unsafe is the implementation of free fare. This encourages even more ridership, packing some trips with customers to where it's standing room only, making drivers feel unsafe to continue. Under the current social distancing order, free fares make it impossible to practice those measures, as is potentially contributing to spreading this deadly virus. People from all walks of life are boarding the buses. They're visibly sick, coughing, sneezing, and other unmentionables on the coaches, and not to mention people that could be infected that are asymptomatic. Also, many of these same individuals are just taking advantage and are joyriding rather than doing essential outings. On that same note, reducing service is causing the same problem. Less trips means more customers for the in-between trips. I understand what I was getting into by accepting this job and possibly being exposed to many different situations or illnesses, etc. In order to protect myself, I made sure that I incurred on my vaccinations. But obviously, no one was prepared for what we're facing today. I fear for my life. I fear for my family's life. It's difficult to know that a fellow operator has lost his life to the virus and still has the desire to want to come to work, especially when so many of us drivers feel unsafe to do so. I offer a few suggestions. 1, stop free fares. Quadruple the current fare in hopes that will discourage freeloaders from riding the buses, and in turn, the increased fare would encourage customers to only ride for essential reasons only. I know it sounds unfair, but we are in a historic pandemic, and this could help keep people home and keep passengers and drivers safe. 2, put more trips on routes. More frequent trips means less people per trip. 3, offer an increased hazard pay to coach operators. 4, shut down operations and completely for an extended period of time for deep cleaning of our facilities and to allow more time to get personal protective equipment. How many more of our drivers will have to become fatally ill before anything of these things are taken under serious consideration? I love my job, but I love my family more. We fear for our lives and our safety as coach operators. And Chair, that concludes the reading of the public comments.
Thank you, Rachel. And I want to thank all of those who took the time to submit those comments. And we take them very seriously, and we appreciate everybody who submitted them. With that, we'll move on then. And I think Emmett will address some of I know Emmett has a COVID-19 response update coming here after the very first presentation. And so that will hopefully address some of the questions and comments that were just issued and offer some thoughts, at least in that regard, for the board and for everybody that's on the call. In between that, though, we do have a presentation with Roland and Sarah on link connections with Northgate. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Heath.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. This is Roland Heath, Director of Planning and Development. I'm introducing Sarah Hayden, Transportation Service Planner. Sarah has been leading our work to redesign express bus service to connect with Sound Transit's Northgate link next year in 2021. Sarah's presentation will provide an overview of our Northgate service design, integration with Sound Transit, and the opportunities for public comment to help inform the board's decision on the service plan later this year. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, and we'll be happy to answer board member questions after the presentation.
Thank you, Roland, and good afternoon. Board members, I want to make sure you know that the presentation I'm about to give is available in your packet. You just page through that, and if there are community members on this or in this meeting right now, the presentation is available on a link from our website underneath the agenda. I'll give you all a minute to find that. So as Roland said, I am Sarah Hayden, and I'm here to give you an update on our planning process around the Northgate link extension, which will be implemented in the fall of 2021. So if we can go ahead and move on to slide 2. I hope everybody has found this. Just give a brief overview of the Northgate Link project. Right now, the northern end of Link Light Rail is at the University of Washington Stadium by Husky Stadium, but by 2021, they will have completed a new addition to that. It's Northgate Link. It's about 4 miles long with 3 stations, one right next to the University of Washington at the U District Station, the Roosevelt Station, and Northgate, which is by the mall. From Northgate, it will be a very quick 5-minute ride on Link to the U District Station and just 14 minutes from there to downtown at Westlake Station. And we have been working here at Community Transit, also in conjunction with Sound Transit, on a proposal for bringing service from Snohomish County to Northgate Station. And the objectives that we have for this project are to provide connections to Snohomish County riders to Link before Link itself reaches Snohomish County, which won't happen until 2024. We hope to increase the travel options that are available to community transit riders. We hope to improve the transit reliability and efficiency by avoiding the congestion on I-5 that's south of Northgate. And we are hoping to coordinate service with our partner agencies to create a seamless network that makes it easier for our community transit customers to get everywhere they're going more quickly and easily. So let's move on to slide 3. We developed initial ideas and took them out in conjunction with Sound Transit to the public in November and December of 2019. And you can see a schematic map of the proposal that we took out in 19 there on the right of this slide. Community Transit's proposal was to redirect all 800 series routes, which are the green lines on that map, the pale green, to redirect all of those to Northgate Station instead of the University of Washington. And once at Northgate, customers could transfer to Link Light Rail to reach the University of Washington or other destinations. We proposed to add more frequent service and later trips to make that connection easier. And we proposed no changes to the 400 series routes. They would continue to provide direct service to downtown Seattle. And those on the map are represented by the pale blue line. And Sound Transit's portion of the proposal was to redirect all 510 series routes. That's 510, 511, 512, and 513 from downtown Seattle to Northgate Station. Those are represented by the gray line on that map. And they also proposed to make those services more frequent to make that connection work for customers. So let's go to slide 4. So we took these initial ideas out for public comment, and the centerpiece of that comment was an online open house that had an informational piece, which you can see part of that there on the right of the slide. And it also had a survey. And out of that process, we got 1,400 completed surveys. We also did in-person outreach at various transit centers and park and rides, and we were able to reach over 2,800 riders that way. We sent out email and text rider alerts. We did targeted social media advertisements and advertisements in Spanish and Chinese as well to try to get the word out to people who would be interested. And so slide 5 has some of the results from that outreach. For community transit, one of the most important questions from the survey was, now that you know more about our ideas for serving Northgate, would you be more likely to take a direct bus to your destination or transfer to light rail at Northgate to reach your destination? And we have people's answers divided up by where they were trying to get. You can see UW riders on the left and downtown Seattle riders on the right. And it's interesting that the people answering whichever is potentially fastest were about 40% of both groups of riders. They just wanted efficiency. It didn't really matter what way they get where they're going. They just want it to be fast. And then about 20% of both groups chose whichever is most reliable. They really wanted their service to work the same way every day, to know they were going to be able to get places on time. So that's about 60% of respondents for both of these categories that really just want their commute to work well. They're flexible about what that looks like, but they want it to work for them. Where we saw a difference then was in the percentage of people who were really committed to busing to Northgate and then transferring to light rail. For UW riders, that was almost a quarter of the riders that wanted to do that. And then about 15% wanted to maintain that direct bus connection to their destination. Whereas for downtown Seattle, it was exactly the opposite, or nearly exactly the opposite, where about a quarter of people wanted to maintain that direct bus to downtown, and about 15% of people wanted to take the bus to Northgate and transfer to light rail there. And we think that indicates that commuters from the UW see that taking light rail from Northgate may have more of a benefit to their commute than it does for riders from downtown Seattle. Let's move on to slide 6. Some other themes of the feedback that we heard from that process, that our riders are willing to change their commute, including adding a transfer, but what they want out of it is improved speed and reliability. Like I said, they want their commutes to work better. They had a lot of questions about transferring at Northgate Station, about how easy it would be, how long it would take, what the environment would be like. Public safety and the access to walking distances to light rail stations from their destinations, those were really important to riders. And they were curious about how long it would take the buses to travel between the freeway and Northgate Station, just not knowing what that station area is going to be like in 2021 when it opens. So based on all those things that we heard, we kind of refined our proposal, and we can move on to slide 7. and start taking a look at that refined proposal. And you'll notice at the top of the slide it says April 2020. That is, of course, this month. And that is because this is when we are releasing this proposal again. The implementation of the proposal will again not be until fall of 2021. But so right now for this phase 2, this refined proposal, Community Transit is proposing to again take all of those 800 series routes and take them into Northgate and let customers transfer to link there to reach the University of Washington and other destinations. We are proposing to add 6 trips southbound in the morning and 26 northbound trips in the afternoon and evening to make that transfer work really well for our customers. And we're proposing to streamline the service that we offer from Linwood Transit Center. Right now, Route 855 operates direct service from Linwood to the University of Washington during the peak. And Route 821 also operates directly from Linwood to the University of Washington, but it also stops in Marysville in Snohomish County. And we are proposing to add a significant amount of service to Route 821 and use that to replace Route 855. Those riders from Linwood Transit Center will also have access to very greatly increased service on Sound Transit, which between Routes 511 and 513 is proposing to have a bus leaving Linwood Transit Center every 6 minutes during the peak period and going to Northgate. So those peak period travelers from Linwood Transit Center would have a lot more service than they do today. And then during the off-peak, we currently have Route 810 that serves Linwood Transit Center, as well as several other park and rides further north. Sound Transit's proposal, again, would have Route 512 during the off-peak would have trips to Northgate every 10 minutes, which is much better than the current 810 service. So by eliminating the stop on the 810 at Linwood Transit Center, we can still provide plenty of service for those customers trying to get from Linwood Transit Center to UW, but also we can speed up the trip for customers from those other park and rides further north. And then we're also proposing all of the peak period routes in the afternoon will have 15-minute frequencies leaving Northgate to get back to Snohomish County, again, just to make that transfer as easy as possible for people coming off of Light Rail. We want to have that frequent service available for them. So on to slide 8, we have the Sound Transit proposal. So they are proposing to take routes 511, 512, and 513 and have them serve Northgate. Route 511 operates directional peak service. That means it's southbound in the morning, northbound in the afternoon, between Ashway, Linwood, Mount Lake Terrace, and Northgate. And Route 513 would also be peak service that serves those same stops, and in addition serves Eastmont Park and Ride and Seaway Transit Center. And those 2 routes in the peak direction would operate together to provide a trip every 6 minutes from Ashway further south. It would be every 18 minutes from Eastmont and Seaway. In addition, Route 513 will be bidirectional during the peak, which means that you will also be able to take that route from Northgate in the morning and travel up to Eastmont and Seaway, and then the reverse in the afternoon. And so this provides access for travelers from the south to reach Boeing and other Everett employers. And then Route 512, which provides the off-peak, midday, evening, and weekend service on these routes, will have significant frequency improvements. On to slide 9, which is the direct service to downtown Seattle that will be maintained. Sound Transit is proposing to leave Route 510 in as direct service from Everett Station and South Everett Park and Ride to downtown Seattle. It will have the same level of service as currently, the same frequency, but they are proposing to add a stop at Mount Lake Terrace Park and Ride. And this will give any customers from Everett the chance to transfer to service that can take them to Northgate and on to the University of Washington or other destinations, just to make sure that Everett customers have that option available to them as well. And then Community Transit's 400 series routes with direct service from Snohomish County to downtown Seattle, we are proposing no changes to those routes, same level of current service that they currently have. So So on to slide 10, where we have schematics of the individual routes. You can see Route 810, which is that off-peak service that serves several park and rides in Snohomish County, McCollum, Mariner, Ashway, and Mount Lake Terrace that ends at Northgate. We are proposing to add 10 trips to that route, some in the midday and some in the evening. And then Route 860 provides peak service from McCollum and Mariner, and then Ashway in the northbound direction only in the afternoon. To Northgate, we are proposing to add 8 trips and bring the afternoon frequency up to 15 minutes from Northgate to make it an easy transfer for customers there. On slide 11, we have Route 821, which again is replacing Route 855 from Linwood Transit Center to the University of Washington. It also serves Marysville. We are proposing to add 17 trips to that route, and that again will have that 15-minute frequency heading north from Northgate in the afternoon for a good connection for people. And just a reminder that customers traveling only to Linwood Transit Center will also have that 6-minute peak service on Sound Transit routes 511 and 513 between Linwood and Northgate. And on slide 12, we have Route 871. That is service from Edmonds and Mount Lake Terrace to Northgate. We are proposing to add 7 trips and again bring that afternoon frequency up to 15 minutes. And then Route 880, next to that from Mukilteo, Swamp Creek, and Ashway to Northgate, we are proposing to add 8 trips and again bring that afternoon frequency up to 15 minutes to make for a good transfer there at Northgate for our customers. On slide 13, we have Sound Transit route 511. You can see that's Ashway, Linwood, Mount Lake Terrace to Northgate. That's that peak period, peak direction. They are proposing to add 19 trips to that route. And then Route 513, which is all of those stops plus Eastmont and Seaway. They are proposing to add 26 trips to Route 513, and it will be bi-directional. It'll also have that northbound service in the morning and southbound service in the afternoon for that commute to Boeing in that area. And together, those routes will offer 6-minute frequency between Ashway, Linwood, Mount Lake Terrace, and Northgate during those peaks. On slide 14, we have Route 512, which provides the off-peak midday and evening service on weekdays and then the Saturday and Sunday service. Sound Transit is proposing to add 59 trips to that on weekdays, which will bring it up to a 10-minute frequency. They are proposing 71 new trips on Saturday, which will bring it up to a 10 to 20-minute frequency, and then 30 trips on Sunday, which will bring it up to 20-minute frequency. And Route 510 will be direct bus service between Everett Station, South Everett Park and Ride, and the new additional stop at Mount Lake Terrace Park and Ride and downtown Seattle, with the same service levels that they currently have. And so slide 15, to end up here, this is our planned outreach during the next month. We'll open that outreach, that comment period on April 6th. We're again going to have an online open house. That's the centerpiece of this. It will again include a survey. We will be sending out digital alerts and email and social media updates to draw people's attention to the open house. We also had in-person outreach scheduled, but that has, of course, been reevaluated because of the public health considerations associated with the COVID-19 outbreak. We are also on the agenda to give presentations at various city councils and stakeholder meetings. Many of those are also on hold as meetings are being postponed again because of COVID-19, so we're waiting to see how that turns out. And then at the Community Transit's next board meeting on May 7th, we will be holding a public hearing for public comment on these proposals. And we will take what we hear in that public hearing and over this public comment period and make any refinements to the proposal, and we will be presenting that finalized proposal to the board at their meeting on June 4th. So with that, I will end this presentation, and I am happy to take any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Sarah or Roland?
This is Nicola.
Yeah, this is.
Go ahead, Nicola.
I would just like to thank Community Transit for working in collaboration with Sound Transit and being as efficient as we can with the connections between the two services. It looks like you've done a great job.
We have somebody whose phone is not muted. If you could please mute your phones if you're not talking. Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments?
This is Stephanie Wright.
Yes, Councilmember Wright.
I was wondering if we have any new projections on how the event has impacted Community Transit and Sound Transit's budgets, and if any of that has been overlaid with the previous plans.
Director Behe, or
this is Emmett. Roland,
go ahead, Emmett.
Roland, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say that the plans that we are presenting today are scheduled for implementation in fall of 2021, and the plan itself is largely budget neutral in terms of the significant amount of increased service that was described in the presentation is primarily reinvestment of capacity that was being taken up with the traffic congestion and the longer route between Northgate and University of Washington. And so the first response would be that it's largely a budget neutral proposal. The larger question too is that clearly there is we're in the early stages of a larger financial analysis of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, and I think it's too early to say what the conclusions of that financial analysis will be. But what we know today is that this proposal, as being presented, is budget neutral, and that it is also scheduled for fall of next year. So we have some time to prepare for any potential impacts.
I guess my thought is, even though it's budget neutral, neither of our budgets will be neutral. So I guess that's what my concern is, that we're still marching straight ahead and our circumstances have changed.
So this is Roland again. One reason that we felt that it was important to move ahead with the plan at this point is that there has not been a change in Sound Transit's schedule for opening the Link Light Rail station, and we felt that it was important to be in a position to implement the plans, assuming that the project opens on schedule. It certainly doesn't preclude us from changing course should that be necessary as we get closer to that opening date. But at this point, given that this is critical path from a schedule perspective toward being ready for that, we felt that it was important to continue moving forward in developing the proposals and securing the public input.
This is Emmett. I can also add that based on direct conversations with executive staff at Sound Transit, they are very committed to keeping their capital programs on schedule to the maximum extent possible. Their position is that projects such as Northgate are fully funded largely through the high-risk portion of the construction investment, and they, as I say, express a very strong commitment to keeping that project on schedule for opening in.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Wright, did you have anything further on that?
Nope, just wanted to raise it. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any other?
Councilmember Todd? Councilmember Todd, please.
Go ahead, Councilmember Todd.
Yeah, thank you. I think Councilmember Wright's comments and questions are good, but I think what we're talking about is getting data now that is needed for critical path for something in the future. And certainly, Councilmember Wright is correct that we may be in a whole different position by then. But I think it's important that we get data on what we would dream is our full implementation and see what customers think about that so that we have the data to move ahead. And if we have to revise that later, so be it. But I think it's good to get this moving now. My only concern would be that this is a tough time potentially to get riders to respond to us. And so we may have to think about the eventuality of maybe 1 month is not enough. I propose that we go ahead with 1 month, but if we don't get enough input, so we consider maybe having to extend it for lack of data. Thank you.
This is Stephanie again. Councilmember Todd, thank you. No, I do think this would be our ideal situation. I just don't think it will be our situation. So, and I do think that while people are home, I'm not sure what their priorities are or if they will be paying attention. So I'm glad that you brought up analyzing to make sure that we have gotten enough public feedback moving forward. I'm just worried that we're going to end up having to redo some of this.
Thank you both. Any other comments on this? Okay. Thank you, Director Behe. Sarah, very good presentation. I'm going to, before we go to our CEO report, we do have another written comment from the President of Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1576, Kathleen Custer, that I would like for Rachel to read into the record also. Rachel, go ahead with that.
Thank you, Chair. Statement from ATU Local 1576. As we watch the news about COVID-19 in the beginning of March, can you hear me okay? Okay.
Excuse me, just a minute. This is Lance Norton, the labor representative.
Yes, go ahead, Labor Rep Norton.
I was requested to read that statement, so we would prefer that the Local 1576 give the statement that Kathleen and her officers wish to be heard after Emmett's response update. Would that be permissible?
Yes, that's fine. We'll do it when we do call on board members. Does that work for you?
If that's what you would like, it would work for me. I would actually prefer it to be at the conclusion of Emmett's response update, but you're the boss, John.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. I'll go ahead then and move to CEO Emmett Heath, and we'll take your report now, Emmett.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin this report by acknowledging the loss of an employee of our agency, Scott Ryan. You all are aware, Scott joined our agency in 2015. He was a friend to many at our agency and beloved by many of his close colleagues in transportation. Scott leaves behind his wife, Heather, and 3 kids, other friends and family. And I wanted to offer that we take just a few moments off the top in quiet remembrance of our loss of Scott. So I'll come back in a few seconds after we've had a chance to reflect on this tragic loss. All right, I'll continue my report. There's a tremendous amount of information to report. I'll do my best to summarize it. I'd suggest maybe if you have a pen and pencil handy, and if one topic piques your interest, make note of that, and we'll come back at the end and have an opportunity for Q&A and discussion. This event reminded me of the recession in 2007 and 2009 in some ways. That recession affected our region and our agency very, very early by comparison to others across the nation. We felt like we took very early and very decisive action on that recession event, and it positioned us to come out of that recession much earlier than the rest of the nation. For me, there's a parallel in this COVID case. Of course, our region had the first case. Our city had the first death. We were the first local area in the country to begin to experience exponential growth in the number of cases. And of course, the rest of the nation is following, in some cases weeks, if not a month or more, behind the very same experience we've had here. The circumstances with this COVID virus have been changing on a daily basis, and it presents a challenge to keep up with developing evolving guidelines, evolving regulations, and new legislation. So it has been a challenge to keep up on a daily basis. How has it impacted us? Our ridership has decreased dramatically. Our commute ridership is down 92%. Our local ridership is down 60%. And overall, our ridership has decreased by 71%. Some COVID virus testing results. We have had 37 employees tested. Of those, 20 of those tests were negative, 10 were positive, 7 are still pending. Of the employees who have contracted the virus, 2 have recovered and returned to work. 1 remains in the hospital, and 1, Scott Ryan, is deceased. Of the 6 remaining positive tests that have been reported to us, most of those are in the transportation department, although several other departments across the agency also have experienced positive tests. The public transportation service that we provide is identified across the nation as an essential service. Agencies identifying it as such include the Centers for Disease Control, the Department of Homeland Security, and the state of Washington. All include mass transit as part of the nation's critical infrastructure. The state of Washington and Snohomish County government have identified public transportation as an essential business. We all hear those terms frequently, but what this means is that a number of our members in our community are still out in the community every day, largely assisting the rest of us in navigating this virus. For example, people with essential business to do in the community include nurses, doctors, pharmacists, grocers, paramedics, first responders, security guards, law enforcement, delivery drivers, service workers, utility workers, warehouse workers, mail carriers, trade and craft workers, union workers, the news, the media, reporters. And I've only named a few, but the point is, life is going on in the community by people who have an essential purpose in responding to the virus and helping to keep others safe and healthy. That, I think, is the essence of identifying public transportation as an essential service. Many of those people have their own modes of transportation. Some rely on public transit, and we follow the lead of those other agencies who have designated public transit as essential in order to help keep the community in response mode. Let me talk for a minute about some employee protections that we have put in place. Of course, stay home, stay healthy with pay and benefits has been a primary goal. Our goal has been to keep our employees safe, their families safe, and to keep our customers safe. We have implemented additional supplemental paid leave programs. To give you an example of their usage, as of yesterday, 228 of our employees had elected to use a new and additional supplemental leave program. Yesterday, 175 employees called in to use supplemental leave on a single day. About as much, perhaps I'm estimating, 90% of our workforce that is not required to be on site is working from home. And we have had a very high usage of the many other forms of paid leave that are available to our employees. Other mitigating measures in place include medical checks for employees arriving at our facilities, a prohibition on employees moving between our various buildings. We've established an isolation area on each of our coaches that isolates the coach operator from contact with the public. We do nightly disinfections of all high-touch surfaces, whether on our coaches or in our facilities. And we have now are at a point where all of our coaches in service use an ADA, a passive ADA restraint system. The advantage of that is that a person in a mobility device can secure themselves, and there's no need for the operator to be in close proximity to anyone using our bus in a mobility device. I'm going to talk a little bit about service reductions. Our goals in reducing our service were to try to right-size the amount of service that we were providing to the changes in ridership. An additional goal was to minimize our coach operators' exposure by reducing unnecessary and redundant service. We have previously implemented a service reduction equal to about 25% of our total service. Roland Behe and his staff are in the later stages of developing a second phase of service reductions. We're hopeful that we will be ready to implement those by next week. Those reductions would achieve approximately a 50% overall level of service reduction and would, in many ways, reflect the level of service that we're accustomed to operating on a Saturday. And we are exploring further service reduction options up to and including shutting down the entire transportation system. Shutdown is a common request. I put shutting down the system in a category that I call says easy, does hard. I would not necessarily object to shutting down the entire system if that was the will of the board, but there is a substantial amount of due diligence to do so we're sure to understand the known impacts and, to the best of our ability, try to identify the unintended consequences. For example, that conversation starts with when would we shut down? How long would we stay shut down? What would be the impacts at the end of that period when we were ready to restart? We'd have to deal with a question of whether or not the employees of the agency would be paid during the period of a shutdown and whether or not their employer-paid benefits would remain in place. In some cases, those are policy decisions that we control internally. In other ways, that may not be the case. For example, one of our first stops might be to the Attorney General to get a legal opinion as to whether we could continue to collect sales tax if we were not providing any service. These are extraordinary times, and even if the law prohibited it, there might be a chance that the governor or the legislature, through some order, could make a change, but we would not want to make a decision, for example, to shut down service, if it would prevent us from collecting sales tax, which represents 70% of our overall revenues. Additionally, there are questions around employer-paid benefits. Those benefits are most often provided through third-party contracts. There are a number of contract provisions that could, if we quit providing service, it could interfere with the third party's contractual obligations to continue to provide benefits, may or may not, but those are due diligence items that we would have to check. Workers' compensation is another one. For example, would workers' compensation still be available to employees if they never came to the workplace and were not providing any service? Life insurance, based on products that are based on hours worked. So shutdown is easy to call for. We want to be very, very thoughtful about what the impacts of doing that would be, especially the unintended consequences of doing it quickly. Moving on, we are exploring some additional mitigation measures. One that we are exploring is the possibility of proposing to our unions that we provide premium pay for employees whose services are essential and who are reporting on site. We have been discussing this for some time and are continuing to evaluate options for providing what is more frequently referred to as hazardous duty pay. If you prefer that term, that's fine, but the point is to pay a wage premium to those employees whose services are essential and must be performed on site. We also will be exploring other programs such as voluntary separation packages, voluntary furlough programs, and early retirement packages. We don't know exactly what this situation will bring in the future. For the time being, our goal is to keep as many people on the payroll as law and policy will allow. If it comes to the point where we need to make reductions in the workforce, I'm hopeful that through a combination of programs like I just mentioned, we can make those reductions occur in a manner that is voluntary. We also made a decision earlier today to provide additional paid leave cash out opportunities. In some cases, employees during this period really can't use their vacation leave or paid leave because the economy is shut down. There's a long story behind this, but the second benefit would be allowing, in some cases, employees to have some PTO cash out, also provide some additional short-term income. Let me shift to communication. First of all, we have our public information officer, two of them trading shifts with each other, so we have pretty much 24/7 PIO coverage. We have identified an interagency liaison who's responsible for coordinating communications with our partners, other jurisdictions and agencies. We have an embedded staff member who works on a regular basis in the location of the Snohomish County Department of Emergency Management. I join a phone call along with Deb Osborne and Mary Beth Lowell three times a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We have a conference call with what we call our mobility partners. You've heard me mention this forum before. The Mobility Partner Forum is all of the CEOs and general managers from the transportation agencies in the central Puget Sound Basin. Those include the CEOs and GMs of Sound Transit, King County Metro, Pierce Transit, Kitsap Transit, the Seattle Department of Transportation, WashDOT, Washington State Ferries, Puget Sound Regional Council, and Region 10 Director of the FTA. The purpose of those calls is for all of those agencies, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of every week, to share the best practices that are emerging in each of our agencies and have the opportunity to implement the best of those practices in a uniform way across the transportation agencies of this region. We also, of course, are communicating via our website. We use multiple social media channels. We have an employee frequently asked questions product that is updated on a daily basis. And there is target audience specific messaging depending on the audience and content that we need to communicate. Our employee engagement director and labor relations manager also meet on a daily basis with the leadership of the ATU. And let me close I'm going to back up for a minute and, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to close with a little bit of information on revenue and expense circumstances. First of all, probably almost a month or more ago now, it's actually probably more than a month ago, we assigned our finance staff to conduct a study of our recession readiness and our financial resiliency to sustain ourselves through a period like this. That work is still ongoing, and we're expecting early results next week. Of course, the two sides of that formula include revenue loss and unanticipated expenditures. On the revenue side, to give you some sense of the order of magnitude, we collect more or less about $11+ million a month in sales tax revenue. We collect, on average, about $2 million a month in fare revenue. Of course, the economy will suffer and sales tax will suffer. Nobody knows yet what the depth of the sales tax reductions will be, and nobody knows how long it will take to recover from the sales tax decline. Likewise, with fare revenue, with our overall ridership is down 70%. I don't think I mentioned, but you are all aware that we have previously suspended the collection of fares. So we are going to see very significant reductions in revenue, and it is uncertain how fast we will recover those revenues as the region recovers from the virus. In the early days, expenditures were the least of my concerns. Expenditures were only occurring in hundreds of thousands of dollars bites. Those are now adding up. Those expenditures, I'm confident, will turn out to be a multi-million-dollar unanticipated expense, and combined with a loss of revenue, it's a very, very challenging economic situation. That said, you've heard me say before with pride, we were recently rated AAA by Standard & Poor's, one of the only AAA ratings in the Regency in the region. We have one of the most robust financial reserving programs of any jurisdiction in the region. All of those reserves are topped off at the beginning of each cycle. So we are entering this circumstance in the strongest possible financial situation. As far as capital projects, mentioned earlier, have had fairly substantial conversation with our agency partner, Sound Transit in particular, comparing policy approaches to how we're going to handle capital projects that are underway or planned. Our approach is, of course, our slate of capital projects pales by comparison to Sound Transit, but in many cases, we're joined at the hip. And if they go forward, their success and our success rely on each other's completion of those projects. And I share their view that on the regional mass transit projects, where we have joint responsibilities, we're going to continue with our current projects. And that completes my update on COVID status. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I might mention
Chair, I have a question.
That we have a number of subject matter experts on the line. Depending on the question, I may answer it. I may ask one of those subject matter experts to respond. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Councilmember Wright, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about DART services and how they've been affected. That's one thing I haven't heard much about. Thank you.
Roland is on the line. I'll give you the summary. DART services have been very, very significantly reduced, I think, as you might expect. The elderly population is identified as especially vulnerable to this virus. I think they are self-managing to reduce their travel. As a result, on a busy day, DART might operate something on the order of 700 trips during a weekday. Of late, they have been operating closer to the range of 50 per day. So this is a huge strain on DART. Their pricing structure never foresaw 50 trips instead of 700. So the good news is the elderly population is choosing to stay home and only travel when it is essential. Bad news is it's straining the contractual relationship. Roland, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was a good summary, Emmett. Nothing to add.
And how are those drivers? Are they under the same kind of rules that our drivers are under with what they're provided in PPE and their safety standards?
I am going to ask Roland to respond to that, please.
Yeah, we have been in coordination with Homage, and we do understand that Homage has provided its drivers with PPE to enhance their safety. The only distinction I would make is due to the nature of the vehicles that Homage operates, they do not have the option for rear door boarding as we do on the fixed route buses, which are clearly larger vehicles. So that's a distinction to be aware of.
Okay, I just think we need to, as we look at our own service and what we're providing in our standards, also be working in conjunction with the DART service and recognizing that they're vulnerable too, and that we also, it's a population that we do need to continue to find a way to provide service for. So thank you.
I would also wanted to mention that the cleaning standards for the vehicles, I think we've socialized with the board the increase in the frequency and the depth of cleaning that's going on with the vehicles on a daily basis, and that has also extended to our DART contractor as well.
This is Kim Daughtry.
This is Emmett. If I may just wrap up on the previous question, I think it's also important for you board members to be aware that part of the role of the 3-time-a-week conversations with the Mobility Partnership is to share what the mitigation practices are, and to the maximum extent possible, make sure that we're all implementing those procedures as close to the same time as possible and at the same level as possible. And the idea being, nobody wants to be left behind with a PPE measure or infection mitigation measure when our partners have a better plan in place. So 3 times a week, we talk about that and try to make sure that somebody like DART isn't left behind with a lesser standard than the other agencies. That's true of our contract with First Transit, also true when you compare our agency to other transits and other state jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmett. This is John again. I'm going to call on Councilmember Daughtry. I know he chimed in. Everybody will have an opportunity to ask Emmett any questions regarding his report here. If we could just go in order. And then I will recognize Labor Rep Norton, who I know has indicated he has comments to make as well. So first, Councilmember Daughtry.
I just wanted to add something about DART. I was out and about for a little while and having to go over to one of the storefronts here, and I saw DART offloading one of their citizens to the same location, and I recognized at the point that they were doing it, they have to get really, really close with their clientele. I mean, physically close, because of what they're trying to accomplish onboarding and offboarding a client. So I think that, and they did have PPE on, and they were trying their best. She had gloves on, she had a mask on and all that, trying their best to be as cordial as possible to the person and get them off safely and back on safely. I watched the whole thing. I talked to the driver and told her that I was really impressed with the way they were handling things. and asked about how they feel about what's going on, and she said everything's fine. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring up there, that personal thing for DART. They're a little bit closer to their clients than I think that we think they are, not able to do it like we are on our bigger buses.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead to Labor Representative Norton now, and then after that, anybody else on the board who wishes to comment can do so. Labor Rep Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say before I begin that the comments that I will be speaking on very shortly will be sent or have been sent to all of the board officers and the alternates. So you'll have these to ponder later. You can probably put your pencils down and look at those later. And this is coming from Kathleen Custer, the President Business Agent of Amalgamated Transit Union 1576, our Vice President, Danny Julian, and the other two officers, Financial Secretary, Recording Secretary. And begins basically about 6 weeks ago, and I begin here. As we watched the news about COVID-19 in the beginning of March, the union immediately sensed the grave implications for people in our line of work. We knew that our members who drive the public around in an enclosed space would be at much greater risk of contracting the disease if proper precautions were not implemented immediately. The March 4th communication sent by Community Transit about this disease to employees and the union directed us to wash our hands and remain calm. Because CT had a plan in place for situations such as these. However, as the disease progressed, the supplies of hand sanitizer, gloves, and Clorox wipes quickly ran out. Some operators did not have access to hand washing facilities in the field, and as a result were completely unprotected. CT offered a kit to operators, many of whom were going out on a full day's work in the field. In this kit was a sandwich baggie with one pair of disposable gloves and 2 small packets of wipes. The union was aghast that this occurred to CT as acceptable personal protective equipment. As a result, the union demanded that CT commit to never sending any employee into the field without access to proper hygiene in this pandemic. We never received that commitment. Passengers were still boarding through the front door. Fares were still being collected, and there was very little communication to operators about what CT was doing to mitigate risk for them. Regrettably, but not surprisingly, our drivers began to get sick, and panic and fear set in. The union continued to demand changes. On March 19th, the union let CT know that if, by close of business that day, CT did not begin backdoor-only boarding and stop the collection of fares, the union would instruct our members to disregard company policy for their own safety, and that the union would contact the media. At 5:14 that day, March 19th I'm referring to, Emmett Heath issued the letter to employees stating that we would be boarding through the back door and to stop collecting fares. To combat the lack of supplies, the union began to organize teams of members, family, and friends to create safety kits, which included proper supplies such as additional gloves and hand sanitizer. Teams of volunteers sewed hundreds of face masks to help fill this critical need, which had gone unaddressed by CT. These teams of volunteers are still doing this today and will continue as long as it is needed. The bus driving community is a family. On March 26, 2020, our family grieved beloved brother Scott Ryan's death due to COVID-19. Our grief fueled our efforts to demand more safety measures for employees. The union had been contacted daily by the media across the country because everyone recognizes that this scenario is not only a risk to our members but to the public. The union has taken note of the measures that the company has since instituted for safety measures over the last few weeks. We have pleaded with CT to provide better supplies, adequate hand washing opportunities, and passive restraint coaches for ADA passengers to limit person-to-person contact. CT assured us that some of these items were being worked on already, but the union was not made aware of any of these efforts. This crisis is ongoing, so the hard questions may still not be asked for some time. But we are already trying to determine what went so terribly wrong here. We clearly see that CT failed to act immediately. CT failed to connect and partner with its greatest resource, the union and its membership, to learn about the obvious problems we had identified and what the greatest concerns of their workers were. When President Custer asked, CT assured the union that they were in touch with authorities and the health department and actively researching the science. But we needed them to understand the work our members do every day and take action to communicate with us what CT was doing to protect them in that moment. President Costa begged them to take increased safety measures beyond those that were being recommended by the health department. Meanwhile, ATU members are still sick and more falling ill almost daily. Our brother Scott Ryan was the first, but we fear he won't be the last to perish as a result of CT being unprepared, their subsequent inaction, and continuing ineptitude. CT's Cesar Portillo, Sarah Burnett, and Steve Kim have agreed to conference with the union daily now to get our crucial feedback on problems in the system, a new approach for CT. The union thanks them for their efforts and the kind and diligent way they are working through this. There are items on our list that have yet to be addressed, and those are the next three. Passenger counts need to be limited. Currently, there is no restriction on how many people can get on a bus. Some routes with all-day riders have over 20 people on board. Social distancing is impossible with passenger counts like this. We must limit the numbers on each coach. Protection barriers are being installed by Metro and Island Transit, as well in other work environments like stores and banks. There are many options for how this could work, and this will greatly help with exposure. We need CT to follow our transit partners and install barriers. When work is canceled due to service reduction, CT presently has employees sitting at peace all day, doing nothing except potentially exposing themselves and others in the common areas, bathrooms, kitchens, etc. Put them on call to come in when needed, as other agencies are doing. The union calls on you to ensure that CT is held accountable for the safety of our members and takes every precaution to protect us in the field. We implore you to press CT to act now. Thank you very much. That concludes it.
Thank you, Labor Representative Norton, for that. We appreciate that. And I'm going to open it back up. Is there any other board members who wish to speak as well? I know we've had a few now. Is there any other board members?
Expires April 13th.
Of this year?
Somebody has their phone unmuted that's not talking. If you could please mute your phone. Okay.
So
I want to thank all those who have spoken, including CEO Emmett Heath. And of course, everybody will have an opportunity to speak later under board comment as well. Right now, I'm going to move to committee reports. I'll start with the executive committee, which met on Thursday, March 19th. Our CEO reported on the status of the agency's response and plans for COVID-19 and provided the CEO report. The executive committee confirmed 3 p.m. April 16th quarterly board meeting workshop would be canceled, so you can take note of that if you haven't heard that. And our next meeting will be on Thursday, April 16th at 11:30 a.m. Next will be Councilmember Todd on the Finance, Performance, and Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me fine?
Yes.
Thank you. So the Finance, Performance, and Oversight Committee met on Thursday, March 19th, 2020. Council members Nate Naring, Tom Merrill, Jan Schuette, and I attended via phone. We have 2 items on the consent agenda today. The first is approval of RFP 2020-001 Vehicle Cleaning Services. This RFP was presented by Ryan Chase, who's the Procurement and SBE DBE Specialist. The RFP is for the on-site vehicle cleaning services of company vehicles at the Merrill Creek and Cache Park operating bases, with the exception of those operated by ParaTransit. The cost of this contract is not to exceed $600,000 during the initial 2-year term, with 3 1-year options. The committee recommended approval and has placed this on the consent agenda as item B. Second item on the consent agenda is the approval of the February 2020 monthly expenditures and payroll, which is included as items D through I on the consent agenda. We also discussed and recommended one item for the action agenda today. That is Resolution 02-20, Mid-Year Budget Amendment. Cesar Portillo, Director, Employee Engagement, had presented the resolution to our committee. The resolution revises the administrative pay plan to fill 3 leadership positions, which are classified in salary ranges but were not included or are new to the pay plan. And as you know, that is the approval of those positions as part of the budget, so that's why we will have a budget amendment today presented later on during the action items. Standard reports, the committees also received the following standard reports that are in your packet. Number 1, the fourth quarter unaudited 2019 financial report. The agency is on track for all of 2019. Community Transit received $212 million in operating fund revenues, approximately $4.8 million more than budgeted on the revenue side. All categories of operating expenses came in under budget for a total of $151.1 million in expenses. That was 95% of the total budgeted amount. So overall, revenues exceeded expenditures by approximately $10.4 million, which adds to the reserves available for projects in future service and to help us through our current problems. Number 2, a sales tax report for February 2020. Community Transit collected approximately $15,539,829 in sales tax revenue, approximately $332,000 more than is budgeted. And number 3, the diesel fuel report. Diesel fuel continues to be going well for us. Our year-to-date through February 2020, Community Transit paid an average of $1.84 per gallon.
I don't think. An hour and 20 minutes into it, so.
We could please mute.
Paid an average of $1.846 per gallon for diesel fuel compared to the 2020 budget amount of $2.25 per gallon. The next Finance, Performance, and Oversight Committee meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. Thursday, April 16th. At that time, we will also be, half an hour before that, we'll have the 2019 Audit Entrance Conference. It's scheduled for 1:30 p.m. on that same day, Thursday, April 16th. And it will be held via WebEx, and you will receive a formal invitation so you might participate. But the Finance Committee will be there for sure. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Councilmember Todd. If there are no questions, we'll move to Mayor Leonard Kelly with Strategic Alignment and Capital Development Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Neary. The Strategic Alignment Capital Development
Mayor, could I interrupt for just a moment, please? I'm going to take a wild guess here that might be Jerry Beardsley, whose phone is not on mute. Wild guess, but
yeah, that's
there
not
we go.
fair, Emmett. I was on.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to.
Sorry to interrupt. Trying to limit the distraction. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Emmett. So the committee met on Wednesday, March 18th. It was attended by myself, Labor Representative Lance Horgan, Mayor Smith, Councilmember Todd, and Councilmember Stephanie Wright. One item was forwarded to today's consent agenda, RFQ number 217-079, Task Order for Facilities Master Plan Phase 3 Design. The item award was to KPFF Consulting Engineers, 100% designed to expand the vehicle maintenance facility, adding critical space to service the agency's growing bus fleet. The independent governmental cost estimate of $879,686 was determined prior to adding more scope and moving scope forward from Phase 3B to Phase 3A for project efficiencies. KPFS price of $1,199,123 is determined to be fair and reasonable, and the Strategic Alignment and Capital Development Committee recommends board approval. There were no action items. There were a couple of informational items. The committee was briefed on the facilities master plan base project, regional transit and light rail integration at Northgate in 2021, Sound Transit light rail construction in light of the coronavirus outbreak. Staff also reported on the deferment of the September 2020 service change, moving out the public outreach process and public hearing due to the COVID-19 situation. The next meeting scheduled of the Strategic Alignment and Capital Development Committee is Wednesday, May 20th at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kelly. With that, we'll move to the consent calendar. Anybody wish to pull any of those items? If not, we'll entertain any motion. Okay.
This is Leonard Kelly. I move to approve the consent calendar.
Councilmember Todd seconds.
Thank you. Mayor Kelly has moved to approve. Councilmember Todd has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to the action item Councilmember Todd referred to, and this would be Resolution 2-20, Mid-Year Budget Amendment. And Director Portillo.
Good afternoon. This is Cesar Portillo, Director of Employee Engagement. This resolution was reviewed by the Finance, Performance, and Oversight Committee, as previously referenced in this call. Annually, through the budget approval process, the Board of Directors approves the salary ranges for the administrative pay plan. Every year, we assess the salary of our administrative employees to ensure that the salaries are competitive with other transit agencies and public agencies. Every third year, Gallagher Benefit Solutions does an assessment of the salaries as well to ensure that the salaries are competitive. And every year, the Board of Directors approves the budget, which approves also the pay plan. Because this year we are going through a reorganization, which includes reinstituting the E9 band. The E9 band was in place several years ago until that particular position was laid off. And due to the reorganization, we are also looking at creating a new band for the Deputy Director of Planning, D73. And the third item is a slight adjustment in the E8 salary scale. That does not impact anyone currently on the E8 salary. The only reason that it is being adjusted at the recommendation of Gallagher Benefit Solutions is to ensure that there are no compression issues between these various bands. The recommendation is that the Board of Directors recommend amendment of the 2020 Administrative Pay Plan salary range table, including ranges E73 and E9, an adjustment to the salary range of E8 for adoption by resolution number 02-20, mid-year budget amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions on this item?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Todd here.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Todd speaking. I would like to make a motion that the Board of Directors recommend amendment of the 2020 Administrative Pay Plan salary range table, including ranges D73 and E9, an adjustment to the salary range of E8 for adoption by resolution 02-20 mid-year budget amendment.
Councilmember Daughtry seconds.
Been moved by Councilmember Todd, seconded by Councilmember Daughtry to approve Resolution 2-20. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
I'm sorry. Did we have a no there?
Yep, that was Steph.
Okay. The motion passes. Actually, I believe we have 8 board members here. Were we missing anybody, Rachel, just so I get the count right on this?
Chair, we have all board members present.
Okay. So the measure passes 8-1 with Councilmember Wright voting no.
Correct.
Thank you. With that, I'll move to the chair's report. I would like to acknowledge, as chair, the very real and legitimate concerns of our coach operators and those on the front lines of this battle here for the agency, as was articulated by the letters and by Labor Representative Norton here earlier. I think we all recognize the difficulty of their job at this particular time, and we know that those concerns are real, and their letters and their comments here today will be taken to heart and considered seriously. I do think it's possible to acknowledge that and to also recognize the efforts of our CEO Emmett Heath and the staff at Community Transit as they have wrestled with something that really we're all wrestling with at every level of this crisis, and that there's no good choices here. We're all making decisions basically between trying to mitigate risk while also get ourselves through this. And so community transit as an essential service is something that I know Emmett has wrestled with. I've been in calls with him. I know his staff has as well. So I think we as a board would acknowledge that, and I know I as chair would just say that our hearts are with our coach operators out there and with their families and with our mechanics and everybody on the front lines. I think as an agency, we just need to put our heads together and do everything we can to come up with whatever solutions we can continually adapt to these changing conditions. And this is going to be with us for a while. And so we need to continue to prioritize the needs of our employees as well as our customers, and also to come together and support Emmett and his team as they make those tough decisions and as they wrestle with them. And so we find ourselves in a difficult position all around, and I appreciate everybody's efforts, and it's time to redouble what we're doing and continue to work our way through this. And with that, I'll move it over to the Chief Executive Officer for Emmett's report.
Thank you, Chair. Like yourself, I also want to acknowledge with appreciation the ATU's comments. In particular, their close that they're appreciative of the daily ongoing meetings with Director Kim, Director Portillo, and Sarah Burnett. That as cause for optimism. It presents a daily opportunity for professional and collegial conversation on the emerging and changing events. So thank you for that. Almost everything we are doing is COVID related, and you've heard my COVID report, so I only have a couple of items today. At your previous meeting, the board authorized Resolution 1-20, which granted additional authority to the CEO to act on matters that otherwise have been reserved for the full board. As part of that conversation, I committed to reporting to the board on a monthly basis on any authorizations or approvals I had given that would fall under the umbrella of that resolution. During the past period, we established a work-from-home policy and an on-call pay policy. Under ordinary times, both of those are decisions that would have come before the board. We also were among the first to implement a supplemental and additional paid leave program ahead of the federal requirement to do so. The establishment of a new employee benefit program is also something that would previously have come before the full board. Additionally, suspending the collection of fares is a matter that would have come before the board. And those are the three actions that fall under the additional delegations in Resolution 1-20. On the legislative front, the federal government now has adopted 3 stimulus-related stimulus bills. In the most recent one, the CARES Act, this is the multi-trillion-dollar stimulus act with $25 billion for public transit. I want you to know that the funding available under that program comes to the PSRC for distribution according to the same formula that is currently in use for distribution of formula funds. The result of that is an estimated $38 million that should flow to our agency as part of the third CARES Act. I would like to believe as well that the mobility partnerships had, I think, some significant influence on the Hill. Peter Rogoff served as our spokesperson. Of course, he's a former FTA administrator, former Appropriations Committee staffer, knows his way around the Hill, and based on conversations with our mobility partnership and Peter's leadership and voice with congressional staff, as well as our own voice with our congressional delegation, I would like to believe that our voice was heard, and several of the things that we told the delegation were important were reflected in the final bill. I want to back up, and also I think I overlooked another decision that we made that would previously have come to the board, that is the service reduction. Adding and reducing service are also decisions normally reserved for the full board. So the original 25% reduction and the upcoming additional reductions are 2 more matters that fall under my expanded delegation. At the state level, we're told it's likely that there may be a special session to address both present and future needs resulting from this event. Also, regarding Initiative 976, the injunction that prohibited or required the continued collection of taxes is continued, as that case now goes before the state Supreme Court. And more on that in the future as there's progress. Also, I think the State Department of Transportation, in compliance with the governor's Stay Home, Stay Healthy and essential business guidance, is suspending most of their construction work. Also unannounced, I think, but of note, the state of Washington has also experienced a COVID-related death. Unfortunate, and we've offered our condolences to our colleagues at the next jurisdiction to have to experience that loss. That completes my report. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Emmett. Any questions for Emmett? Okay, we'll go on to board communication. I'll start with Councilmember Daughtry.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Kelly.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Merrill.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Nearing.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Labor Representative Norton.
Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Schuette.
Yes, and I guess I should have asked, I do have a question for Emmett. One of the biggest things that I am seeing with the virus clear across the world is shortage of supplies, not enough sanitizers, face masks, etc. And I know that in the letter that Lance read from the union, that was one of their concerns. So my question to Emmett is, how are we doing on supplies, and is there anything we can do to help?
Thank you for that offer. Let me give you a two-level response. The sort of minimum required, or the bedrock response, is that through the Centers for Disease Control, Department of Homeland Security, in the state or in the federal level, the OSHA Act, the state WISHA Act, those all include legal requirements for the provision of PPE. Up to this point, we have met every regulatory and legal requirement for the provision of PPE. But that is not the level of provision that is expected by us or by most people. But I just want you to know we have complied with every legal and regulatory requirement. What we're working on now is to acquire and stock levels of supplies where we can basically make them, I don't want to say flood the market, make them available in greater quantities. The only PPE item that we have run out of is Clorox wipes. In other areas, we have had to strategically constrain the distribution of PPE items in order to make sure that we always had enough on hand to provide them to people whose the performance of their essential duties required them. Now, in the process of making sure that we met the minimum requirements, we were constrained in providing as much of those products as some people wanted, understandably and rightfully. So our procurement folks are continuing to make best efforts to acquire additional quantities with some success. I believe as the event goes forward, we'll make ever improving progress towards having beyond the minimum required supply of those products and have more on hand. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mayor Smith.
I would just like to offer that I stand with Chair Naring with regard to his earlier comments. I have the same sentiments and feelings. It's such a difficult time, and we're just going to have to continue to communicate and collaborate and continue to hold each other up. We're in this for the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Todd.
Thank you. I've got one report and one request of Emmett. First report is that the regular meeting of the Transportation Policy Board and the Transit Caucus at PSRC are canceled for next week. There is some sentiment that there are important transportation things to be done, but everybody's pretty busy back in their city. So they are talking about how to continue communication so that folks can coordinate and understand what other jurisdictions are doing about transportation capital projects. But for now, that meeting is canceled. The second one, I want to react to some comments I've heard and kind of ask for Emmett for some comments. I recognize that we've heard observations and concerns from some of our coach operators about passenger loads, particularly riders that are maybe not using transit for essential travel and or using it for joyriding or just seeking shelter from the elements. I'm curious if other agencies like Metro in particular, where they typically have even higher passenger loads, are they seeing problems with too many passengers? I know it'd be tough to control that since we don't have people enter by the front door. I'm just curious if that's an issue and if it's something the mobility partners have been talking about. Thank you.
Yes, mobility partners talk about that 3 times a week. Generally, across the mobility partners, ridership is down anywhere from 70 to 90%. However, there are more popular trips and routes and times of day where even though the overall average may be down 80 or 90%, you can still have more people on a bus than you should have in order to achieve social distancing expectations. So what we need is a targeting approach and there's more work to be done here, I think. Some agencies are in the process of establishing limits passenger limits and asking the coach operator to keep count, and then bypass intending customers once they reach a certain level. Let's see. To the first part of your question, when everybody is talking about suspending fares, the point was not to make transit affordable. The point was to achieve coach operator isolation. If we collect fares, the fare box is at the front of the coach, and a passenger has to come up the stairs and pass in close proximity to the operator, sometimes engage in conversation with the operator. So our primary effort was to look for a way to provide isolation for the coach operator. And to do that, we needed to suspend fares because there's no way to collect them if you don't have somebody come through the front door, the Swift line being an exception. So we closed the front door. We taped off the interior passenger compartment from the rear of the ADA section back. So the operator has something in the neighborhood of an 80 to 100 square foot area where they are isolated, and no boarding passenger comes close, and no passenger in the compartment can violate that social distancing process. It was not an unintended consequence, but an unavoidable consequence that when we suspended the collection of fares in order to achieve coach operator isolation, we made it affordable for people who had previously been unwilling or unable to pay to now get on the bus and stay on the bus. Different agencies are taking different approaches. Some are much more strict in their enforcement, requiring all passengers to alight at the end of a route, although they do allow them in that situation to reboard almost immediately. So the increase in ridership among that population that previously was either unwilling or unable to pay has increased, and we talk about ways to mitigate the impacts of that on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Councilmember Wright.
I've talked plenty today. I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Have I missed anybody? I've tried to get everybody. Did I miss anyone? Okay. There's no need of an executive session. Is there any other business related to the corporation we need to discuss? Okay, again, before we close the meeting, I want to thank staff for setting up this conference call and the ability for the public and board members and everybody to join in on this, and for everybody's adaptability. Thank again all the folks who commented, and everybody stay safe. Take care of yourselves and your family, and with that, we will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you very much.